Welcome to the Building Materials Sales and Marketing Podcast, presented by Mark Mitchell, a sales and marketing consultant who specializes in helping building materials companies overcome difficult sales problems. Mark is the author of the book Building Materials Channel Marketing and a frequent speaker at industry events.
Hello, this is Mark Mitchell from Wizard Strategy. Today, I want to talk to you about how to effectively train new employees of building material companies. And primarily, I'm talking about new sales employees, new marketing department people, but this really also should extend to certainly customer service and literally anyone who interacts with the customer, that they should go through this training. And I would say all the way up the ladder, the new chief financial officer, for example, when I spent some time at Zappos to learn how they train their employees, I learned that when they did hire their new chief financial officer, that they had to spend 2 weeks doing things like being on the phone, selling shoes, shipping shoes, handling complaints. So they really understood the customer. So the more of your team that is properly trained, the better. But in today's world, it has to be the salespeople, the marketing people, and customer service. That those three are for sure. Now, most building material companies fall way short in training. They don't invest enough time, which I guess is money, but they don't invest enough in training their new employees. They will typically teach them about certainly the company and how the company operates and administrative details like sign up for insurance and here's how to fill out an expense report and here's when it's due and those kinds of things. And they will usually give them a basic training in the product. And perhaps they'll even give them some basic sales training, for example. But many times that's about it. Now, if they're a salesperson and they're new, they will perhaps have to ride along with a more experienced rep or manager for a while. If they're in the marketing department, then the leader of the marketing department is going to, if you will, train them, which many times has to do more with this is what our company does, this is what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. This is what your job is, which is more about doing things than thinking or making them better. So the companies that step back and from the beginning train their team members properly are head and shoulders above the companies that don't. I was at a siding company sales meeting. I met with a new young salesperson who'd been there about 2 months. And I asked him, I said, what are you going to do next week? Just like to know, what's a week like for you? And he said, well, he was in Texas. And he said, I'm going to Oklahoma. And I said, okay, why Oklahoma? And he said, well, I don't think any of our salespeople really spend any time in Oklahoma, and they seem to spend a lot of time here in Texas, so I thought I'd just go to a new territory. Okay, so this is something you just came up with on your own? You weren't directed by your manager or the VP of sales? No, I just thought, just to go do it. We're expected to just go out and make sales calls and kind of fend for ourselves. And my next question to him was, who are you going to call on? And he said, well, I'm going to call on architects. And I said, why architects? And he said, well, they design houses, don't they? And then I said, okay, how are you going to pick the architects that you're going to call on? Oh, I'm just basically going to, look them up online as if it was the Yellow Pages and just start knocking on doors. I said, okay. And I said, have you ever installed siding? He goes, no. I said, have you ever been on a job site where they are building a house or installing siding? No. I said, okay, well, good luck to you. And I just shook my head and I thought, wow, he was a sharp young man, but he just had, the company had been in such a hurry he can sell, just send him out there. as opposed to really preparing him. Now, I have kind of a different viewpoint of how to properly train a new employee of a building material company. So the first thing, I know that they have to go through some administrative things with the company to start with, or, on their first day of work. Okay, so get that out of the way. But then the next thing I would do is literally I would get them away from the company. The first thing I'd want them to do is I'd want them to understand literally the history of your product. So if your product is roofing, I want them to be taught, when did man have the first roof? Okay. How did he discover he needed a roof? I guess he came out of his cave or something, discovered he needed a roof. And then what did he make that roof out of? Okay. What was he looking for? What were the properties he was looking for in a roof in those days? And then, I don't know how far back that goes, but then take them through time, like a history lesson, all the way up to today, of how roofs have changed, how the materials have changed, and the advances that have been made, changes in the needs that the building owner has, for example, maybe how it's installed, how it's sold, all of those things. So you really ground them in literally a world history course on your type of product. So now they're really grounded in, they can put why your better product, they can put it in context with a really big picture. Not just the context of our warranty today is 5 years longer than the other guy's warranty. So they can go all the way back and say, roofs were first started to do that. Let's not lose sight of why you have a roof on the building in the first place. And you'd be surprised how many architects, contractors, owners have lost sight of many of the basic reasons why they do a certain thing, because they just do it all the time. So after they've had this history of roofing or whatever your product is, the next thing I would want them to do is to, on their own, spend time with your customers and understand your customers. So the first thing would be to literally map out for them, how does your product get to market? Okay. Do you sell your product to a one-step distributor who sells it to a contractor who installs it for a builder? Or a homeowner is an architect who specifies it, but then there's a contractor who actually buys it? Map that out for them so they really understand how it gets to market and who perhaps prefers to use a product, specifies it, but in the end doesn't really buy it, and how an influencer can come in and talk them out of something. So make sure they have a good understanding of that. And then let's say that you sell from a one-step distributor to a contractor who then sells to a builder. So have them spend a day with a one-step distributor. Not there to sell, but to learn. Tell me about your business. Tell me about the business of being this type of one-step distributor. How do you make money? What are your challenges? What are your goals? What are your threats? Who's your competition? How do you outperform them? What type of customer are you looking for? Now tell me, Mr. Distributor, what do you think about our company? Okay? Where do we do a good job? Where could we do a better job? And tell me about our competitors. What do you see as our competitors' strengths and weaknesses? And from there, have them then move on and spend a day, for example, with a contractor, and not riding along with one of your senior salespeople who is already set in their mind about many things that are no longer correct. So you want your new employee, sales or marketing or customer service, to form their own opinions, ask their own questions. And after they've spent a day with a contractor asking many of those things, if residential new construction is a target of yours, have them spend a day with a builder. Have them talk to the purchasing person. Have them spend some time out on a job site. And certainly the first phase, don't have them learn how to install your product based on how your internal technical people, show them that it's to be done correctly. Make sure they spend time out in the field so they can see how it's actually installed. And so once they're really grounded in those things, I literally would quiz them. I literally would, ask them to sit down and tell me about the history of our product. Tell me about one-step distribution business. Tell me about the contracting business. Tell me about the builder's business. Tell me what you heard from these people that are the strengths and weaknesses of our company and our product. Tell me what the strengths and weaknesses are our competition. Okay? So now they know more than 50% of all building material sales and marketing people with that basic education. Now, it shouldn't take a long time, but it probably will take a week or two. And yes, it'll probably involve some travel expenses. And it will involve pulling a few favors to ask a customer, can one of my new employees spend some time with you? Or you could have them spend in one city, they could spend a few hours with a couple of different customers. But I wouldn't rush that. I just really want them to understand and be curious about it and form their own opinions. And now you teach them about your product. Now you really get them to understand your product, because you don't want them sitting there and I will say accepting everything that you tell them as truth. You ideally want them asking questions like, well, that isn't what the contractor told me. The contractor thinks this about our product or has this problem. Okay. Then, you make the person teaching them internally to defend that and to explain to them what their real situation is from the company's perspective. Another area that you need to cover at some point is, how does a customer do business with us? How do they place an order? If they're a new customer, what do they have to do in the way of a credit application, for example? If they have a warranty claim, if they have an installation question, a technical issue, what do they do? Okay. Now you present all that to them. And once again, they're looking and saying, every customer I talked to was frustrated because of the way that we don't acknowledge orders. Okay. So you want them asking these maybe a little bit pain in the ass questions back to you, because they're seeing the difference between the real world and how you're presenting the world to them, which many times is how you'd like the world to be more than how the world really is. Now they're ready if you want to do things like teach them how to be a salesperson and certainly show them, how to install your product. I would also take them through your manufacturing facility or engineers or whoever, so they really understand, from if you were taking your product apart with a microscope, you want them to really have a good understanding of how your product is made and why it's made that way. Then I think I'll call it the final part of the training should be a real deep understanding of your company. Okay. What is your company all about? Okay. Now, unfortunately, in today's world, we may run into a company which is, our goal is in 3 years, we just bought this company. We're going to increase the sales and make it look better. In 3 years, we're going to sell it. So there really isn't a history about the founder and how the product was invented and what the founder stands for and the company stands for, other than let's make more money and get out of here. And if that's your story, that's your story. But with many companies, there's an amazing story where you really get a sense of, like, who was the founder? What was the original problem? I always love, with how Barclay Simpson of Simpson Strong Tie, started the Simpson Strong Tie business. It's a great story. I loved how there was a guy at Owens Corning, or before probably Owens Corning, there was a guy named Gaines Slater who was trying to figure out things to do with glass. And there's a great story about him and a bicycle and some molten glass and how fiberglass was invented that way. A lot of companies that I work with have a really great story. How was Tyvek invented? Who discovered that asphalt would make a good shingle? There's always a great story. Who discovered that, windows should be built the way they are? What did your company do to make that even better? What need did they see that wasn't being met? So make sure that your new employees are really trained in that so that they have a deep understanding of, I just don't work for a window company. I work for a company that stands for this. This is where we came from. This is what we're known for. And I'm proud to work for this company. So that is I think is the final part of it. But if I can leave you with a couple of things. One is the importance of training them, at least in the basics, that they understand your product, how it's made, how it's installed. There are too many companies that don't even take that step. And then the next level up is to train them, as I started out, with the history of your type of product. What did man do when he first stepped out of a cave? And when did he first have a door? When did he first have a window? When did the window have some covering in it? Was it glass? Was it what did they do? And walk through the history of your product so they really understand. And as I said, what is so helpful is it puts all the wonderful things about your product you're doing today, it puts it in context so they understand, how did we get here and why? Okay? And they're much more confident in talking about your product when they have a deep understanding. I find many salespeople particularly can be a little nervous with customers the first literally year because they don't feel confident in their body of knowledge to talk to somebody. And so their body of knowledge is very limited, so they keep their sales conversations in that little tiny area. We sell windows. Do you want to buy some? Yes, our windows are made of this framing material and they are double pane or whatever they are. Okay. And I'm not going to ask any other question about problems builders have with windows or anything. I'm going to just kind of try to hide a little bit, which is unfortunate. The same things happens with marketing and customer service people, that it takes them a while to almost kind of stumble along till all of a sudden they wake up one day and go, I understand this now. Wow. Well, what if that didn't take 2 or 3 years for that to happen? What if, if you invested a week or two in training up front and it was like giving them a year or two's worth of experience in that week or two, think about how much more valuable those employees would be and how much faster they would be that more valuable to you. And as I keep, iterating over and over again, that the benchmark for building material, salespeople, marketing people, and customer service people in terms of their knowledge of the customer and the history of your product, for example, is so lacking that it really is not hard to have, the best sales team and marketing people and customer service people in your category with just a little bit more training. And then the next part, which is probably literally the most important part, is to learn the customer from their own point of view. Don't learn the customer through the viewpoint of their regional manager who's been calling on builders for 20 years and knows everything. Let them go out on their own and find out what they're going to find out. And then they can talk and ask more intelligent questions about what they've learned, what they've experienced. And they can add more value. They can bring their view of the world to bear on the issues, that challenges of how do you sell a builder. The other thing that happens is it starts them out by seeing your product and your company through the eyes of the customer, rather than we start out by, here's the customer through our eyes. It's much better if they can start out by seeing your product and company through the customer's eyes. Now, even if you don't agree with my order of events, I encourage you to include those two components in your training. The component of understanding the history of your product category, and the part of it about understanding the business, each customer within the channel that you have to sell through. So that can include, for example, big box buyers. If you sell to big boxes, I'd try to see if you can have your people literally work in a store for a day or shadow somebody in a store. If there's facilities managers, spend time with them, architects, general contractors, subcontractors, builders, one-step distributors, two-step distributors, lumber dealers, remodeling contractors, whoever it is, every single new employee, maybe except somebody working in the plant, but every other single new employee, no matter how senior they are, should go through this. It will really make a difference in the performance of your company, how you grow your sales, and maybe even more importantly, how you're able to retain customers, make it more difficult for the competition to take the customer away, and finally, to make price a lot less important because you'll have customers who can't imagine doing business without you when you have such an amazing team that works for you. So I hope I've given you something to think about this week, as always, and think about how you can apply some of this back into your company. And as always, if you feel your company could benefit from some outside expertise and perspective like I can bring to it, please feel free to contact me. We can discuss how I can help your company.
Thank you for listening to this podcast from Mark Mitchell on building materials, sales, and marketing. We hope he gave you some fresh perspectives on how to grow your sales, and will listen to future episodes.